One of the biggest questions that we get is, why do I need to sign a buyer's representation agreement? Well, that's a fair question, and I'm going to explain what that is and why it's actually meant to protect you. So, it is not a commitment for you to buy a house. We're not making you buy a house. Just because you sign a buyer's representation agreement does not mean you have to buy a house. It does not mean that you are required to do anything other than let this agent represent you should you buy a house during that timeline, and for the area and location and everything that's put into that buyer's representation agreement. It's very specific, and so it's outlined what exactly you are agreeing to do. But basically, you're letting that agent represent you for a certain time period, for a certain area, and you don't have to buy a house though. It's basically there to clearly define who represents you. So if you are hiring an accountant or an attorney, you deserve to know who's working for you and who they represent and who they're looking out for. So the point of a buyer's representation agreement is to explain who works for you and what we do for you, and our obligation, our fiduciary responsibility to look out for your best interests, not ours. Now listen, I know a lot of people think of realtors as salespeople, and technically we are, but the reality is I'm not looking to force someone to buy something. I am here to be a trusted guide to help you find exactly what you're looking for, to look out for the best deal, to point out things in an inspection report that you might not notice, to point things out during a walkthrough that you might notice, to remind you that you told me that you really do not like mismatched flooring and you like this house, but did you notice that it has several different flooring types? I just want to make sure. So the point is, your agent is there to look out for you. And so I know I'm in sales technically, but I feel like my job is to look out for a buyer when that is who I'm working for, to make sure that they are very well represented, that I'm looking out for their best interests start to finish. And my job is to help you find what you're looking for and then walk you through the process of making that happen. So that buyer's representation agreement says what my obligations are to you, what your obligations are to me, or whatever agent that you sign a buyer's representation agreement with in Texas. And honestly, what's happened lately is that in the last couple of years, laws have changed and things are different in every state across the country. The last I heard, every single state except for one, which was Alabama, that could have changed, but that's the last that I heard, you had to sign a buyer's representation agreement with an agent before they can show you a property, before you can go see a house. Now, there is a way that you can get around that, and that is by calling the listing agent. But what you need to remember about the listing agent is that they work for the seller. So yes, they can give you information about the house. Yes, they can answer your questions about the details of the property, and maybe even answer some questions for you about the seller's timeline or something like that. But the reality is, as a buyer, you want a real estate agent who is looking out for your best interests and working for you. So it is in your best interest to have someone who represents you, who is a professional, who this is their job, this is what we do all day, every day. We aren't representing the seller, we're representing you as the buyer, and that is what you want when you are looking for homes. So what is my job as a real estate agent? It's to help you find a house, it's to schedule showings, it's to negotiate on your behalf, to coordinate inspections, to help manage deadlines, to guide you through closing. We communicate with the title company, we communicate with inspectors, we communicate sometimes with vendors who need to give us bids on things, and we are communicating with the lender. And so we're doing all of these things and looking out for deadlines and time frames that need to happen in order to keep things on track. And we're doing a lot of things on your behalf to guide you, to get you to closing on the property that you want and that you love. So it also explains your responsibilities too, though. You have to communicate honestly with us. You have to work with the agent that you've hired. You have to understand how compensation works. It goes over how we get paid and what our fees are and who pays them and how all that works. And that way, everybody involved knows what is expected from beginning to end. Remember, compensation is negotiable. So sometimes the seller will offer a certain amount of compensation up front to a agent who brings a buyer, and sometimes they don't. And now we don't even ask about it anymore most of the time, because as a buyer's agent, we are going to do our best to ask the seller to pay your buyer's agent's compensation. However, what you need to know is that it is your obligation and your responsibility to pay for your agent, but they're worth it because they're looking out for you. And this is a hard, legal, complicated process. And so our forms in Texas have changed about 10 times, give or take, in the last 2.5 years. And I'm not exaggerating. And I'm talking about the contract. I'm talking about our listing agreements, like things that are super important and have a lot of ways that can get you into trouble if you miss a deadline or you don't know what something means. So you really do want representation, and you just need to find an agent that you like, that you trust, that you feel is going to do a good job for you, because it really is important and it's worth it if you were the person who had to pay for it. However, it is negotiable, and we are always going to ask the seller to help cover that. Sometimes they will do part of it, sometimes they will do all of it. You just have to know your responsibilities and your rights up front, and that's what that buyer's representation agreement explains.